I don't know how, a lot of people like that. I mean, there's just so much you can do with KDE, but it's just so buggy.
Yeah.
So I tried Solus Budgie, and it's just so good. And this is Manjaro. It's my first attempt at Arch Linux, which is one of the more difficult to install.
I've heard about that, but I still haven't tried it yet.
It's regular Arch Linux is installed completely through the command line, which I wasn't quite confident enough to try. Mainly because I figured I'd just fuck it all up. But Manjaro and Antigros both have GUI installers, so it wasn't quite too bad.
Okay.
So I have this brand new Dell laptop that came with Windows on it, right? And I went through and I completely deleted Windows on it and put. I think I started off with Ubuntu because it has a UEFI booter. The UEFI.
Oh yeah.
Really terrible security software that they put on your hard drive, so it makes it hard to boot from USB keys. So I had to turn off that and go back to the legacy boot mode.
I shall aid you however I can.
And then I put on Ubuntu, right? And then I went to another distro and another distro, and I found one that I just didn't like. So I was like, I'm gonna take this back to Windows and see if I can't finally figure out how to dual boot on a UEFI system.
Oh yeah.
Turns out I can't reinstall Windows at all. So when I formatted the hard drive, I changed the type of partition to something that doesn't support. And I haven't been able to figure out how to change it back to the more specific, because in order to change it back to the one that Windows supports, I have to have UEFI back on. Which means that I can't boot from a Windows key.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, can't you just set it in the BIOS to UEFI and then it would tell you that
but then I can't
format the disk?
Right. But the problem is, in order to get back to a place where, so if I turned on UEFI, I'd have to be able to boot from a USB key in order to format the.
Yeah, you still can.
I haven't been able to figure out how.
Really? Because we've got a couple machines here that are UEFI, and I've booted from USB.
So I figured out how to get to a boot menu, but when UEFI is on, it won't read anything from a USB.
Yeah, you have to look in the BIOS, because you said you have a Dell machine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you go into the BIOS, even if it's in UEFI, there's somewhere, I can't remember where, it might be under the boot options, boot order or something. You can specify
right, but this machine for some reason turns off. So once UEFI is turned back on, it disables everything having to do with legacy. So it turns off boot order, it turns off boot mode or boot menu. So I can't get in there and change any of that stuff. I don't know. I've been Googling it. It's not a big deal because my main desktop is back to Windows. Which was a pain in the ass because I had to start out. Well, no, see, my main desktop, I'm dual booting. I have I have Ubuntu Budgie on there and Windows. The problem is I can't not have some Windows. And we can blame Adobe for that. I use Photoshop, I use Audition, I use Premiere, and I don't care what any of the Linux fanboys say. There's just nothing on Linux that compares to Adobe Audition. And okay, so the nearest, so I asked a few people that I follow on Twitter who are big Linux guys, that is there an audio editing program on Linux that is similar to Premiere? And their response was Audacity. Have you seen Audacity recently, Ricky?
Not recently.
You want to know what? It still looks the same as the last time you saw it because it looks like it was developed in 1995. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it looks exactly as it looked when it was developed, maybe for Windows 3.1. It's terrible. I'd actually be better off editing audio in the command line terminal. I wonder if there's a way to do that. Like, I know you can, like, I saw a web browser in a terminal the other day. Like, it's all text.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Like W3M, it's like, I don't think I want that. I'm a nerd. I'm just not quite that much of a nerd. Okay, so in case you haven't noticed, we've actually started the podcast. This is
But I mean, that ties in nicely to our topic, anyway. So
yeah. So I don't really have an intro for this podcast, Ricky. Normally I'd say, "Hey, everybody, welcome to the Linux podcast." I'm so sick of doing that, so I just decided to just start talking. I'm Matthew Weber. That's Ricky Williams. We're started. Today's topic is why hasn't Linux gone mainstream? And I have some really good answers for this, Ricky. And I'm going to come up right now and say that one of the reasons why is because every Linux distro has this terrifying way of installing and booting. At some point, it shows you scrolling text, right? And every once in a while, you'll see the word fail or error, and it just scares the living daylights out of you. Because like, what do you mean error?
Seems these
did you delete all my information? I mean, if Windows did that, people would be going terrified. It'd be like showing the blue screen of death every time your computer booted up.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, that's not the main reason, because you actually have to try Linux in order to be terrified by the scrolling black screen of text. But if you're, say you were interested in Linux, but you're not really a techno guy, and you got into there and you finally got, you're installing Ubuntu and you see the scrolling list of text in a command line, I can just feel, I mean, it scares the crap out of me every time I turn my computer on and I see the scrolling text or whatever, and sometimes you have those brackets with the green OK in the middle. You know what I'm talking about? And then you see one that says failed. Like, what? Like, does that mean my computer's never going to turn on again? Is my computer going to explode? It scares the shit out of me.
You're always welcome here.
So that's one of the reasons why I think it hasn't gone mainstream. So that and choice. All right, so there's all right, so do you remember back when we were like probably Tech Weekly on the other podcast, Ricky? I made a metaphor about spaghetti sauce. So I mean, this just has to be 5 years ago. I mean, ages and ages ago, and that's how. I mean, we've been doing a podcast together for 7 years, almost 8 years.
That's crazy.
So yeah, I know, it's insane. So obviously this one's newer, but on the other podcast, we went through a whole bunch of different iterations. But it's kind of shocking that at least 5 years ago I was still talking about spaghetti sauce. It was around the same time that I got into Heavy Rain. I was talking about Heavy Rain. Anyways,
the villagers take to their homes by night.
I think one of the reasons why Linux hasn't gone mainstream is kind of like salad dressing. If you go into or cereal is another good example, metaphor of this. You go into the grocery store, you walk into the salad dressing aisle, and what do you see? You see 50,000 different kinds of ranch dressing. Which is the best one? You don't know. So what do you end up doing? You end up going with the one that's the cheapest. Or the one that is the most popular. It doesn't mean it's the best, but there's just so many different choices. And Linux is kind of like that. Now, in the last month since our last episode, I have tried approximately 10 different distros. Seems like every day. Yesterday, I installed Manjaro, which is what I'm using now, and I'm very, very impressed so far with the stability. I mean, we're recording a podcast on Linux, something that we didn't think we were going to be able to do, because at least me, because I'm an idiot, so I wasn't able to figure it out. But I figured it out. Manjaro is a distribution based on Arch Linux, which is one of the more difficult and more complex Linux distros. But I've also installed Ubuntu Budgie, I've installed Kubuntu, regular Ubuntu, Ubuntu GNOME. I've installed Solus Budgie. I think I might have already said that. I installed Fedora KDE. I installed Fedora GNOME. This is all within the last month. And see, all right, so another thing about my personality is, Ricky, when we were running a tech blog, remember how I changed the theme?
Every week?
That's what Linux has become to me. Is I can't settle on one because each one has these awesome different features. Like I really enjoy this Manjaro budgie, but it's not quite as customizable as Solaris budgie or Solus budgie.
Yeah.
You can't add panels. You can't edit the panels that are already there. It doesn't come pre-set up, so you can put icons on the desktop. Even it's more like GNOME in that. So I've had a hard time. I think one of the reasons why it hasn't gone mainstream is there's so many different choices. How are you supposed to pick the right one? And even if you go on YouTube or Google or whatever and say best YouTube distros, I mean, you're going to come up with a list of the same ones. I mean, everyone's going to say Ubuntu or, I mean, most of them
mainstream ones.
Yeah, they're going to choose Ubuntu or they're going to Mint Cinnamon. I've seen that a lot. Yeah. I mean, they're not going to tell you to install Arch right away because, I mean, Arch is, you know, completely command line installer. But, I mean, there's just so many different opinions as to what's the best. There's so many different ways to install it. It's just so confusing for the regular beginning. I mean, if I tried to tell my mom how to install Linux, she'd look at me like I was a moron. Because there's no way she'd leave Windows. I mean, I tried it. There was a cloud-based Linux called Jolly or something like that. And it was basically Chrome OS before Chrome OS was really good.
Yeah.
It was, you know, just a browser and web apps. And like this is perfect for my mother because that's all she does is use Chrome. I mean, she doesn't leave it ever. She hated it. She despised it. I mean, literally, it was the same UI that she deals with every day. But the startup was different because there was these big gigantic buttons for menus and it looked different. She hated it. And I think that's, I mean, for the vast majority of people who use Windows and Mac, they're so used to that one way of doing things.
Yeah.
And even if they considered switching, it was just too much choice. So what about you, Ricky? Why do you think Linux hasn't gone mainstream?
I've got a whole bunch of things. Okay, so when I consider mainstream, I think of Windows and Mac OS. Okay, so now if you compare it to those two, at one point it was cheaper because Linux is free. So compared to Windows, where you're shelling out $150 to $300 for an upgrade, while free is cheaper. And Mac used to cost some money. I think it was like $20 or something like that. But now, but now Mac is free. But the thing, even still, that you're contending with Linux, why it still has a good thing to it, is that Linux works on all types of hardware. Whereas Mac, you get up into the higher OSs, it starts dropping off the bottom end hardware. Which, that's just how it works. You're adding features and, the lower end hardware can't take it. Whereas Linux, you can load it on all this older hardware. That's what has always been known about Linux. Now, like you, when I decided to try Linux, I bought a new Dell laptop. I wiped Windows out and I installed Ubuntu. I also wanted to install Kali because the whole point that got me into Linux was that I'm studying penetration testing. So the thing for me, when I look at how I've installed it and stuff, like when you say mainstream, you're talking about users who are they're not technically savvy per se. Like not all of them. There's a wide range. The thing is, so first you consider the hardware. I bought a brand new Dell laptop. So you're thinking brand new. It's got like 16 gigs of RAM, nice new processor, monitor's nice. This should be great. Okay, I load up Ubuntu. Well, the Wi-Fi doesn't work because the driver is different than the stock driver that comes with Ubuntu. So now I had to go online and look up how to fix this. Well, for some people where they only have one computer, the Wi-Fi doesn't work. Now they don't have online capability. Now they got to go out to the library, to a friend or whatever, come back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so right off the bat, you're talking about you can't even just buy a Dell laptop or run into the store and buy a Toshiba laptop, load this thing up, and it's gonna work. You know what I mean? That's one strike there. There is a manufacturer, System 76, and they produce laptops specifically for Linux. Everything works, all the drivers are there. But you're talking about $3,000 and up. Like
Yeah,
there's
they're
no,
pricey.
yeah, there's no $1,000 laptop. You know what I mean? Like you can't compare it to Dell. So that's that. Then you move on to the software side of things. Okay, Windows. This is where Linux used to be okay because, back in the day with Sushi and Fedora, you used to be able to get it on a disk. Okay, now things have, no one does disks anymore, not even Windows. The problem is Windows. You download a thing, put it on a USB, boom, that's all she wrote. Mac, you don't even need, you just, hit your option key and the Mac automatically knows as long as it has an internet connection, it will download the OS and install it. You don't even need a USB key. Linux, I tried. I had a USB key. I downloaded the ISO. I should have been set. How do I get the ISO onto the USB key? Because it's not understanding. I had to Google. I had to figure out that in the terminal you have to put in these commands that will format the key in a file system that Linux understands, and then the ISO will be written to it. Like, who in mainstream is gonna know to do all that? On top of that, I wrecked like 2 USBs because while writing, I don't know if the write was too fast or too slow or the file system, or I wrote because I did a couple different distros. Maybe I wrote too many, whatever. Then I went and I had Ubuntu. It was on my machine. I said, okay, now I want to deal with Kali. I did it one way. That didn't work. I had to go to the forum. I had to write. On the forum, no one else knew how to do it. I ended up trying it. I installed Ubuntu fresh, and then I installed Kali, whereas before I was installing Kali and then Ubuntu, and I had to format the hard drive in a specific way where I divided it in half so that, Ubuntu would see its half and then Kali would see the empty space. Like, when you're talking about mainstream, these are all things that it will never make mainstream. I think if Linux distros, like the famous ones like Ubuntu, Mint, Fedora, if they were to, put the ISO image onto USBs that they do, and you go to the site and it says, hey, just put in your address and we will ship you the USB key. All you have to do is pay for shipping and it will be there in a day. A lot of people, rather than the 3 days it would take them to look up this info online and format their USB key, they would do it, and that would go a lot further. But I think until they start getting drivers together where you can just buy any laptop or desktop from any manufacturer, toss Linux on, and everything's good, that's going to hamper them. You're talking about also things like, hey, I got this Dell, I loaded up Linux, and then, a BIOS update came out. And, Linux forums say, hey, this BIOS update is great. Now, a whole bunch of things work, but the BIOS doesn't flash in Linux. Now you gotta figure out how the hell am I gonna flash this laptop? Like for me, when I had the first Dell laptop, I took the hard drive with Windows out completely. I put in a totally new hard drive. my reasoning is if I didn't like Linux or whatever, I could just swap the old hard drive back in. No muss, no fuss. So how did I end up flashing the BIOS after trying 1,000,001 things? Put the old hard drive in, boot it into Windows, flash the BIOS, switch back to my Linux system. You know, they've got things like Wine, so you can run EXE for programs and stuff. You brought up a good point. You know, like you're looking for a replacement for Photoshop. Well, there's GIMP. Hey, I know Photoshop like a boss. And I can honestly say GIMP, I was barely able to figure out how to crop and do stuff. Like, you know, Photoshop to a beginner has a huge curve. So if I can master that, sure, I could sit down for a month or two.
Terrible. I mean, people sing its praises because, you know, it's free, and it's, you know, it's open source, and it's, you know, it's great. And while those things are fantastic attributes for something to have, it doesn't automatically make it good.
Yep.
Now, I understand. Trust me, if I could find an alternative to Photoshop on Windows or Linux that, you know, was free, I would jump at it for a second, because I mean, it's $60 a month. I mean, that's an atrocious amount of money to pay for any software. Especially when you're not using it for, you know, something that makes you money.
Makes you money, yeah.
So, I mean, it's an expense that doesn't really make sense, but there's just nothing out there that compares. GIMP just doesn't do it. Now, on the Mac side, at least, there's a lot of Mac software that compares to it. There's guy went totally blank.
Well, there's Intensifier too. There's also, what is it, Pro?
There's also like Pixelmate or Pixel.
Yeah, Pixelmator.
Pixelmator, yeah. Like that's. I mean, it's not as powerful as Photoshop, but it looks good. It's easy to figure out. You know, so Mac is a lot easier to find something that's alternative to the Adobe products. Where Windows is just not that thing, and on Linux, it's not even close. I mean, when you're talking about finding an audio editing program, and they point you towards Audacity. Now, I'm like I said, it's open source or whatever. It's you know, it's stable and it does work. It has all the features of Adobe Audition. It's just not as, you know, that the UI is not as friendly. It's not as well designed. It's not polished. It looks old and it feels old. It feels like it was designed in the 1990s, and that's the thing, is that it was designed in the 1990s. So, I mean, I don't know. So there's a couple things you talked about, Ricky, that I want to talk about. First of all, you're absolutely right about the drivers. Although I haven't had any problems with Wi-Fi drivers, just graphics card drivers and display drivers is just, I mean, it's not a good situation on Linux.
Oh yes, I should attest to that.
It's just not. I mean, because you know, you have NVIDIA drivers and graphics drivers, and then you have open source versions of those drivers that don't really work. So if you're on older hardware and you're lucky to find a driver that does work, chances are it's just not really going to be very good. So especially, and you really notice when your display driver doesn't work very well when you're scrolling on a web page and it looks like it's tearing. And it happens often, especially on older versions, on older computers, you know. So like I have this, my main desktop is about 12 years old. But it has some upgrades, you know, it still has the original processor. But, you know, it has 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I went through and, you know, I have a fairly reasonable standalone graphics card with 2 gigabytes of VRAM. You know, so it's, you know, it's not like a top of the line gamer's graphics card, but then this computer can't handle that, so I mean, it can't really, you know, but it should work just fine. But on some of the Linux distros that I've tried, the tearing is just terrible. And then that's an older hard drive. On this brand new Dell, I installed. I can't remember what. I've tried so many distros in the last month. I can't really remember which was, but one of it was. I mean, this is a brand new Dell. It has integrated Intel graphics, so it's not, you know, any special graphics card or anything. You know, you think it's gonna work just fine. You know, no. I mean, sure, the screen turned on, but the scrolling was terrible. You try to move a window around, like you click and drag or whatever, and it's like you're living it's like you're trying to run server software on a Raspberry Pi, the first generation. It's not it's not good. I don't know, that driver situation, it can just really be bad. And
then
go ahead, Ricky. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and then the other thing too, just to add to that, so with Linux, yes, you have great communities and you can find the answers on forums and stuff. But the thing is that all these threads that are out there, that have been out there for years, who cleans them up? No one does. So, if you're looking for information, you're finding old-ass information.
It might not
try
work.
it. Yeah, and it doesn't work. And then you find new information, and you find newer information. It's like, yeah, that information is there, but there's so much that you don't know. So you just end up trying all of them, and you know what I mean? So...
Yeah, that's what I found is, for some of the things that I've gotten stuck on, is YouTube has actually been a better place for me to get information than forums.
Oh, okay.
Mainly because there's so YouTube does a better job of burying really old information.
Yes.
So they put the newer stuff at the top, because it's Google, right? They want you to see the newer stuff that people actually are still going to get paid for. Because the older stuff, chances are people still aren't maintaining their AdSense accounts or whatever. So the newer stuff's at the top, and that's where I get a lot of my information. So pretty much every distro has the ability to theme the windows. So like GNOME and Budgie use GTK for themes, and I think, and then there's like the Unity tweak tool for Ubuntu. There's the GNOME tweak tool for Budgie and GNOME. I can't remember what, I think Fedora uses those as well. So I mean, you can go through and theme your windows, but if you want to download themes from the internet, installing those is not actually all that easy. You think that there'd be like a button in the appearance menu or whatever where you can install for a while, but there's right. But there's specifically in KDE, there's not. They took it away. It's no longer there. In GNOME-based environments, the way you have to do it is through the terminal by moving it from your downloads folder into user/share/themes or user/share/icons. So I mean, you have to be familiar with. So this brings me to the biggest point of the page. I think terminal really is the problem. For it really is the bottleneck past the drivers. I mean, if you overlook the drivers problem, it's the necessity of being able to learn at least basic functionality in terminal that's going to prevent most people from using Linux. Because there's still things that you have to use terminal to do. Whether it's installing certain programs like Spotify. Spotify doesn't have Spotify's available for pretty much any Linux distro you want, but you can't just download it, install it like you could on Windows. You have to get into terminal and you use apt-get or EO package or whatever distro you're using and get it through the terminal. Same thing with Chrome. A lot of times Chrome you can't just install if you're not using Ubuntu or OpenSUSE or Fedora, using some other distro, you have to do it through terminal. I mean, all of these are very, very popular applications. I mean, yeah, you can get Chromium. I use Chromium just because it's basically identical to Chrome, and you actually get so it's perfectly fine, but there's no really alternative to Spotify. Same thing with the Plex Media Server, which I have been able to get to work on my main desktop, which is another thing that's preventing me from moving to Windows, or moving from Windows. So I mean, if you have to learn terminal, nobody's saying you have to go in and you have to become an expert at terminal, but you have to know the basics to install things and move things around.
Yeah.
And most people aren't willing to do that. They want a GUI. And that's just the way it's always going to be, I think. Most people just are never going to learn. I mean, for us nerds, using the terminal is awesome. I mean, we love getting the terminal and learning commands and shit. For my mother, and she would probably shoot me if I tried to get her to use the terminal. It'd be justified too, because I mean, you shouldn't have, in this day and age, if you're wanting to be mainstream, you shouldn't have to go back to MS-DOS. And I mean, can you imagine where Windows would be right now if in order to install a program you had to open up the command line or MS-DOS like it was in Windows 90, XP or whatever? I mean, nobody would ever install a program. It just, those programs would never exist. It has to be a GUI. And that's the biggest problem. So, anything else to say on this, Ricky, before we move to the picks of the week?
No, I think we've pretty much covered it. All
right. So, my pick of the week is Plank. Now, when Ricky took a look at this, he messaged me and asked me, "What the fuck is Plank?" And I'm surprised you don't know Plank, Ricky. Plank is a dock, like Mac OS dock.
Oh, okay.
That's what Plank is.
Yeah, I know. Isn't there one called Docker or something like that?
I believe there is. There's also a new one that, so in the next main version of Ubuntu, when they go to, they're going to be creating a dock out of something called Latte, I think.
Oh, okay.
It's brand new. Yeah. I really want to try that, but it's only available right now for KD and Plasma. But anyway, because frankly, I will say this.
You know what? Yeah, you just brought up another good point too, which I forgot, is the update. Like right now, I'm on Ubuntu 16.4, I think, and like Windows, Mac, when it's upgrade time, you just do the upgrade, it upgrades your machine, all your files are there, just like normal. But in Linux, like, I mean, I'm not a Linux head, an old Linux hat, so maybe I'm thinking about it wrong, but it feels like every time there's a new one, it's like either you don't upgrade, so you just stay on the distro you have, or if you upgrade, it's like back everything up, wipe everything, install, and then restore. Yeah. Go ahead. You reminded me of that.
Just along those lines, there are some Linux distros that are rolling releases, like I think OpenSUSE is one.
Yeah.
And those don't come out in major versions. Those you just update and just keep going. But you're right, in Ubuntu, it doesn't seem that that's the case. Anyway, so Plank obviously is free. It's good. I think it's the best dock out there right now that's available across distros. But it's not very customizable. So like there's no easy way if you have multiple monitors to put it on both monitors. You can do it, but you have to be comfortable with the command line. And I haven't been quite comfortable enough to do it because I don't want to ruin my whole computer. But I'm getting a little bit more comfortable. It's also I mean, it has the regular functions like you put it on different sides of the screen. You can pretty much put like a trash icon there. One thing that really bothers me that you can't do is put an application launcher in there. So like there's no icon in any of the distros that I found that use Plank for me to put an icon there that would launch a launcher or an application menu or something like that. Now, GNOME doesn't use Plank, but they have, and same thing with Ubuntu. They don't use Plank. They have a little icon that will bring up the launcher. But if you're just installing this on your own, there doesn't seem to be a way to do that, and that really bothers me. So there's some problems with it, but it's really nice. It reminds me a lot. It makes me feel like I'm making my own Macintosh. It's kind of great. But it's free software, so it's kind of cool. All right, so Ricky, why don't you tell us about your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is Telegram, which we've been using for last little while here. So I use an iPhone primarily. iOS is great. The thing I love about iOS is the fact that it's on multiple platforms, as in I have it on my Mac, and I have it on my iPad, and I have it on my iPhone. which makes it easy because any device I'm using.
I think you meant iMessage, not iOS.
Oh, sorry, iMessage. Yes. Any where that you guys message me, I'll get it. So we've tried different messengers in the past, like Slack and a couple of others. Can't remember the names. And the thing, the thing I didn't like is that they were very restricted to the platforms, and that's why I love Telegram, because it's available for iOS, Android, Mac OS, Windows, and fucking Linux.
Yeah,
like
Linux,
when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, Apple needs to buy these guys and just roll iMessage into this so that it would be everywhere. Oh, it would be so awesome.
It would be good. It would be really good. And along with that, they can buy Plex and get rid of fucking iTunes. When we're having these streams, great. Obviously not going to happen. They like their little
locked in.
Yeah, terrible. Bring iMessage to Android, or here's an idea, Ricky. They could stop deleting my shit on iOS, so I wouldn't have to switch to Android the next time I go.
Well, they just hate you with that.
They do. It's terrible. I mean, they keep deleting my pictures and my contact information. It's just.
Well, you want to know the funny thing? I know when I tell you this, you're gonna start laughing, but I'm actually considering buying Google Wi-Fi to install in my house.
Google Wi-Fi, like as in the internet service or the
no,
router?
the router, the little.
Oh,
router.
right.
I know how much I love Google, right? But
don't you use like an Airport Express right now?
I do. I use an Airport Extreme and an Express, but they're old. Like,
well, yeah, and Apple's not gonna.
They're not doing anything, right? So the thing is, I could buy the last Airport Extreme, which is 1 year old, newer than mine, which costs over like almost $200, I think. Yeah. Or I could buy a Google Wi-Fi, which just came out. It's a mesh router, so I could buy multiple, and it only costs $180. Yeah. So you know what I mean. And the thing is, like in terms of routers, you think security because there was the whole problem with I think it was D-Link or Asus or Netgear or something, where their routers are all fucked, right? Like they have like the security hole. With Google, I mean, Google is a top dog like Apple, right? Like if their routers, like, it would be all over the internet, right? Like they would have major cake in their face, you know what I mean? So you kind of know that they're going to be updating it. And like Apple, the router will pick up the update itself rather than you going and downloading this, bin file and then go in and, you know what I mean? So yeah, I cannot believe I'm saying that, but that's what I'm looking at.
So I use an old Netgear router, and the reason why I use this Netgear router is because it has previous to that we used like D-Link, and then we used Linksys before that. Yeah. But like every year and a half or so, it would just die. Mm-hmm. Because they were cheap. So we got this Netgear router. And it has a lifetime warranty on it. So I have a hard time getting rid of it because, like, you want to know what? It dies, I contact Netgear, I get a new one.
You get a new
one. I really do want the look into the Google one because I had a Wi-Fi or an Apple router a long time ago. But see, I think the Google one would actually work better for me because it's probably more skewed towards Windows. Yeah. So like Apple, you can go through and do a lot of stuff on Apple routers on Windows because they have software or whatever, but it doesn't feel as native to it as it would like on a Mac.
On a Mac, yeah.
And I have no Macs.
Yeah. So. Well, see, that's the thing. That's the only thing that's keeping me from getting the Google Wi-Fi, which I have to look into, because I've seen that that everything I've seen says the setup is very dumbed down. Like you can't go in and set like. I'm just throwing it out. I don't know. I haven't seen the setup. I'm just trying to give an example. the example may not be true. But for instance, if you wanted to go in and set up a Mac filter, like I've seen, not specifically that reference, but like the interface is not that advanced where you can go in and configure different things and put yourself on a different subnet and stuff like that. So that's the only thing that's, I'm kind of thinking, whether I want to do it.
Yeah. All right, so that is it for us this week. Actually, hold on a second. We do want to talk about the sketch for a little while. Ricky was an idiot.
Yeah,
and had another child. I don't know what the hell he was thinking, because he had the first one. He was like really, really busy, and he decided to do it again. I don't understand. They make contraception for a reason. I don't know what your problem is. Obviously, I'm one of those people who will never expand the human race, and for good reason. They don't want more of me wandering around. But anyways, Ricky's really busy, so we've kind of moved the TheLinuxCast from twice a month to just once a month, and it will be posted at the end of every month. So that's the reason why you're only seeing one episode a month. This is August's episode, and it should be posted by the 31st or so. I just wanted to let you all know that that's the reason why you're not getting weekly updates.
So they can all write into me.
So it's Ricky's fault. You can contact him on Twitter. If you email at TheLinuxCast.com, I will pass that along. All of your hate and death threats, we'll pass that right along to Ricky. I'm at MTWB on Twitter. The LinuxCast is at TheLinuxCast. And coming up on our next episode, Ricky, I have an assignment for you. You're going to install Manjaro Budgie.
Yeah,
you're going to
problem.
use it for a little while.
Yeah, no problem.
I don't care if it's in a virtual machine. It doesn't have to be on hardware.
No, I got a fresh hard drive I can install.
That's you have a whole month to do it. Do
Yep.
it at the beginning of the month and then use it for a little while. That's what we're going to talk about next time is Manjaro, but Manjaro Budgie. And that will be our September episode. We'll see you then.
All right, sounds good. Hope you guys enjoy.
So I installed Manjaro Budgie again on this laptop.
Yeah.
And Saeed, who's our new guy, he's installing it right now.
Yeah, I'm doing the demo.
Hopefully not on the same machine he's recording on. That could be sad.
We'll know if he cuts out.
Yeah, I'm casting from the live image. So, quite
really?
exciting.
Living on the bleeding edge.
Right. Golden
You
release.
installed this like a couple weeks ago, right? So you've been playing around with Manjaro for a couple weeks now?
Yeah.
All right. And you're running it on like a desktop or a laptop or something?
No, I went with virtual. Yeah, I was gonna do it on the desktop, but rather than go through all that pain, I figured, what the hell, I've got the ISO, just load it up on the virtual and see what's up.
Yeah, see, I cheated a little bit because I was using Manjaro for most of August. So I actually stopped using it for quite a while and then went to Antergos, which I found out runs better on my main machine than Manjaro for some stupid reason, because they're both Arch, right? So I suppose we should talk about what Manjaro is. It's an Arch-based distribution of Linux, which means it's not Ubuntu. So it's another distribution, kind of like what Fedora would be, or OpenSUSE, something that has its own package manager, which is really what I found when I first loaded up Manjaro, I was confused because I was trying to, I was like, apt get Chromium. Apt get Chromium. I was like, apt get's not there. Like, where the hell's apt get, right? And then I remembered, well, not everything's Ubuntu, Matt. You're dumbass. So today I want to talk a little bit about the package manager, which is Pacman. But they also have PacAUR, which is what we'll go through and get packages from the AUR, which is awesome.
Yeah, they have the CLI, and then they have two graphical interface.
Yeah. And then there's Yourt, which is also on Fedora. I think Yourt's also on Fedora. I'm not sure. Anyways, I haven't really played much around with Yourt, but I've been dealing with PacAUR, which is awesome.
So Yourt is like a package specifically for Arc to be able to improve the Pacman. So it's specifically to Arc Linux, and this allows you to have some sort of better control and more colorful looks in the CLI shell for using the Pacman package manager. But also it has like direct connection to the AUR. So that means you can download like community repositories and packages directly using your without any other middleware. But it's also from command line. So, but yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about the package manager situation thing, because, like I said, I've come to realize that I don't like Ubuntu anymore because of the AUR. Maybe it's just me that has a problem with going to Google, finding a specific PPA, whereas kind of the AUR is kind of everything's like right there. Especially even if you just use the graphical interface, just have a search the AUR on Manjaro. Which you see the difference between Antergos and Manjaro, other than the few tweaks that Manjaro does over Arch Linux, is that you set up the AUR support in the installer on Antergos, whereas in Manjaro you have to actually go into the graphical universe, the GUI on the package manager, and select the AUR after putting in your pseudo password. So it's a little bit different. And then we should talk a little bit about Budgie, because Budgie is actually a desktop interface or desktop environment from Solus, and they just went to version 10.4, which Manjaro has the ability to use 10.4 if you do the updates, and it's quite a bit different. But like in Antergos, it's still on 10.3, so I've kind of been using both. So we should talk about a little bit of that. So let's start with the installer. The installing process experience. What did you guys think about installing Manjaro?
Weird. It's very weird.
Why do you say that, Ricky?
It was easier than when I installed Ubuntu and Kali. But I'm trying to figure out if that's because I was so much more of a noob than I am now. The interface is nice, but like it didn't. I don't know if that was if it was a limitation of doing it in a virtual machine rather than like on my hardware. But it wouldn't recognize my mouse, so I had to use my keyboard to do everything, and everything was really weird. Like it didn't just have a straight. Like when you do Ubuntu, you get, two options: run it as a live disk, so it's running off the USB, or install on your hard drive. Really easy to understand. This thing had there's nothing that said install. It just had I just happened to think, okay, I went through the options and then I'm like, okay, I think it said boot something another or whatever, and then I went to that and it booted from the USB or the ISO image, I guess, and then it offered me the option to install. So that was really weird. But then even when I did the install, so I put in the information, it's doing the install, and then I looked away for a little while, and when I came back, it was at the login screen, but it was logged in as Manjaro. So I'm like putting in the password it asked me for, didn't like that. Put in the password for the admin account that it asked me for, didn't like that. So I had to go and search online, and then the default password is just username Manjaro, password Manjaro, and then that's when I figured out, that the login was actually from the installer. So once I did that, it allowed me, it said, installation is done, do a reboot or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like little tiny things that are like really kind of misleading, like for a newbie. But I mean, overall, the graphical interface and everything is pretty nice. It's more like
Don't overdo it.
it's like halfway between Linux and like what you would expect from like a Windows installation.
All right, so Saif, what did you think about? You're installing this now for the second time, so did you have any problems with installing?
Well, no, I didn't face any problem. I mean, I actually installed it 3 times. One was using the the architect setup installation, which is a command line installation where you need to provide the Manjaro user and admin, like Ricky just said, and do some sort of a more manual expert installation. That's something cool they provided that way, because the true thing about the Arc is that you set up your SO the way you want it, and Manjaro has this architect installation, which is some sort of a middleware between something customized and something user end. So I went through that, and it was not for the noob, that's for sure. There was lots of decisions to make, and how do you want to boot, where do you do API, MBR, where do you want to set up swap, how much, and source, standard things. And then I tried the GUI installation from Buji. So the first time I did it, I used a laptop, VirtualBox, and just set it to work with 1 gig of RAM. And for that amount of RAM, yes, it struggled a lot, so it's not a lightweight distribution either. The installation is slow because, well, I didn't have an SSD there. But then I also tried it with an SSD, and it takes some time. It takes a little bit more than the average installation time that any other operative system does. But the Buji GUI interface is clean. It's kind of straightforward. You choose whether you want to use the same password for root and the same one for admin, and then, well, you get, after you finish it just asks you to update. You have kernel updates, and you have the Manjaro good things about the hardware detection, and even Steam comes installed. So so the installation, yes, it's not that very for newbies, but the GUI interface, it was clear, at least for me. So that was my experience.
Yeah, so I've installed this probably 12 times in the last 2 months, because I've been between my 2 or 3 computers here. I've been going back and forth between distributions like a madman. I've tried pretty much everything underneath the sun, at least in terms of main distros. For no parent.
Matt is growing Linux beard.
So, Ricky, you know me, man. When we were running a technology website, I switched that theme like daily sometimes, because I love change just so damn much. And there was a reason why we weren't successful. And I'm doing the exact same thing with Linux, because I love change. I always want to try something new. So, I find a new distribution, wipe the hard drive clean, install it, hate it for about 30 seconds, install Manjaro or Antergus, and go to Ubuntu. I installed Linux 3 times just yesterday. I had Manjaro Budgie on it first. That's where it started, and then I went to Manjaro Mate, which I wanted to try, because like everybody's on YouTube is like, oh, Mate is awesome, and I hated it. Used it for about half an hour. I was like, oh, this sucks. I went back to Ubuntu, or not Ubuntu, but Manjaro Budgie, and then I downloaded the new Solus, which is Solus 3, and I installed that, and that doesn't like touch screens anymore. anymore. So I went back, and then this morning I installed Manjaro Budgies, and that's where I'm now on this laptop again. I mean, the poor SSD is going to hate me. It's a good thing that it's on a mechanical drive, because the thing would have been dead by now.
But would you ever go back to Ubuntu?
I think we'll talk about that when we talk about package managers, because my answer to that is no.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do with installer. So, from an install experience, Manjaro, I had no problems at all, anytime, except for one time, where it for some reason wouldn't format and reinstall the partitions on the hard drive. I'm not sure what was going on there. I don't know whether or not the USB key was funky or not. I'm not sure. But that was just one time, and I think it was more of a fluke. But I had no confusion. Like boot from the USB key, you're automatically in the live, on the live image, and you can just use it, right? I mean, unlike where Ubuntu tells you do live or install, you're just automatically in the live version of it. And then you have to, if you want to install, you hit the button in the welcome screen, and then it just walks you through it. I found it very simple. It's a little, comparing it to Antergos, which is I guess it's a cousin or something. I mean, because they're both, like I said, both Arch. I like the install experience on Antergos better because it gives you more options. So like, Antergos has one ISO to choose from. That's all they have. And then while you're in the install experience, you can choose from 6 different DEs. So you don't have to say you want to run Antergos GNOME. You can choose it from the installer. You don't have to install. You don't have to download that specific ISO. And it also gives you the option to choose what software you want installed. So you can choose whether or not you want Chromium or Firefox. You don't have to order or both. You can choose if you want LibreOffice and so on. But Manjaro is more just whatever's on the ISO, that's what you're getting, right? So you have to download specific ISO. So comparing those two. Now, what Saif was saying, you said you tried the CLI version of the installer.
Yes, I did the Architect setup. Yeah.
So that's more of an Arch experience, because if you wanted to install just straight up Arch, not going the Antergos from the Manjaro route, that's all going from the just text-based.
Right. It's not text-based. It's like not Arc. I mean, I've installed Arc a couple times ago in the past few years. It's you can follow in the user guide in Arc. You can do it, but yes, you need to have more understanding because they won't explain things if you don't read it by yourself. The good thing about the Architect install in Manjaro is something in between that, so it's more like a guided wizard. So it's not like command shell where you need to write down your own commands, but it's more like a keyboard interface oriented installation with a wizard. So it's quite far from Arc, but it follows like the same structure in installation. Like, okay, start with time zone, your keyboard language, what are the repos you want to use, what are the mirrors you want to use for Pacman, set up your clock, hardware, digital logical clock, so on.
You get a lot more input. You get a lot more choice, it sounds like, through that option than you do through the GUI, right?
Yes. You can even choose different file systems like BTRFS, XFS, whether to use LLVM and other formatting configurations you want to choose. So yes, you have to understand something, but it's still better. I mean, not better, but far away from the original Arc installation where you boot into command line and you're on your own, right? So this is more guided setup, and it's a cool thing.
The reason I asked is because I've got Ubuntu on my laptop, right? And it's all set up. I mean, I've had it since last year. So I've got all my programs set up, and so I'm just trying to think of your users out there, and there's so many distros, and it's like, if I use it and I like it, okay, sure, but then you got to think, so that means I gotta take my data off, I gotta format, install, then I gotta put back all the programs that I have, You know what I mean? Like with Windows, there's just one Windows. Is a new version, you do an update, all your programs are there. Same with Mac, right? Like with that, it would be nice if, say, you wanted to switch from Ubuntu to Manjaro, and you could do it. And I mean, it's obviously way more complicated, would never happen. But you know what I mean? Like if I've already installed, you know, IRC clients, I have, you know, like encryption programs, Telegram. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to go and do all that over again. So maybe that's a detractor for me.
Yeah, you're never going to be a distro hopper, Ricky, if you hate installing stuff.
Starting from scratch.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? Even in Windows and Mac, like when I set it up like how I like it. Like it's maxed out with all the settings, but that's it, right? Like if I get a new version and I have to start from scratch, it's a pain in the ass.
Is see what
right?
Linux needs. All right, so there's a website. I'm not sure what it's called. Like, so you install your Windows install, Windows 10 or Windows 8 or whatever, and then you go to this website. You pick a whole bunch of software that you want, and then you just hit one download button, and it downloads every single thing you want and installs it for you. Linux really needs that.
Wasn't there a version of Linux that was like that? I swear I remember a version where you install and you would have like a whole bunch. You could check off like a whole bunch of software that you want to install and then go through and download it for you.
Yeah, I've never heard that one.
I think what they need is they need one installer and abstract the Linux away from the, like, have two layers where one is like, I mean, obviously it would be really hard, but just in dreaming it up, right? Like, so you'd have one installer, you would go in and say, you want Ubuntu, right? You would have like a list of Ubuntu, you know, sushi, whatever. You check the one you want, and then you check all the programs. But then after it installs, the Linux is abstracted from your programs. So if you want to switch to a different one, like say you want to switch to Manjaro, you would go in and just click it, and it would sort of be like how you have like a launcher, right? Like you have GNOME or you have KDE, like you can switch between them, right? You know what I mean? Like I'm thinking that kind of thing. Obviously it's impossible, but
you need
I like my programs. I hate.
And you don't want to switch. You're very you're right. It's never going to happen because Linux people like their choices, and the different distributions are so different. So this kind of we can kind of start talking about the next big thing, which is package managers, right? And then we'll finish up with Budgie. So Manjaro and Arch, however you want to say it, uses Pacman, which is the package manager, in contrast to what like Ubuntu uses, which is apt-get. When I first started using Manjaro, when we first started talking about doing this review, I was very apprehensive after I learned that it used a different package manager, because like I know how to use apt-get. I know it's like instinctive use of, you know, opening terminal, sudo apt-get install, you know, whatever. Whereas, you know, I had no experience whatsoever with Pacman at all when I installed Manjaro for the first time. So thank God for the man command. You know what I mean? So it was like man, Pacman, and then, you know, it was just a process of learning. And once I got into the experience of using Pacman and discovered the AUR after turning it on, I discovered I really, really like the way Arc and Manjaro and Antergos does it. And the reason why is because, I mean, once you turn on the AUR, everything is there. I mean, literally, pretty much every piece of Linux software you can imagine is either within the Arc repositories or within the AUR, the user repositories, and you don't have to worry about going to Google Chrome, finding a specific PPA, on Google or something, I don't know, some shady website that you're not sure exactly is right, or an old PPA, or because you're not quite sure it's there. I mean, there's no one place. I understand that that they're trying to do that with some of the different kind of packages like Snap and what's the other one? What starts with an F? Flatpak.
Yeah,
so
that's a new one coming.
Right. So that they're trying to get a place where they're kind of all congealed together, but whereas PPAs are kind of all over the damn place, right? So you have to really there's no place where you can just go find a list of everything you want. You have to. I'm going to install Google Chrome, so I have to go to Google, either download the dev package or figure out how to do that off of Ubuntu. Whereas in Arch, it's just you go to the GUI if you want it. You're not going to use the terminal for the CLI for the first bit, and you type in Chrome, and Chrome comes up in the AUR. You click the little button, click apply, and it enter your password, and it installs. Same thing with like Terminator or Franz or the Google Music Player or Plex Media Server or Albert. Anything that I use, it's all exactly right there in one place, and it's literally awesome. I'm having a love affair with the AUR. It's kind of pathetic. I'm in love with a piece of software.
So how are you installing AUR packages? Are you like downloading the tar files and running a package, or are you using some GUI from Manjaro?
No, so like if you so they have, you can do two different ways. All right, at least from the experience that I had so far. You can open up the GUI software, add remove programs in Manjaro, and then you have to get into the preferences and enable AUR. Once that's done, you only have to do that once, and then you just search for something, hit the button, apply, and it's installed. Or you can go to the command line, hit pacman -S, and then pack AUR. And that will enable you to use pack AUR, and then you just go pack AUR -S, and then the package that you want to install, and it installs. I mean, it's literally as simple as that. And the only downside is, especially if you're going to use the CLI, it's not going to be very good for new users because you have to know the exact package name. So you can't just say, or at least it's easy for like Chromium and Firefox and Evolution because those are the package names. So like Chromium is the package name, unless you want to use the Git version, and then you'd have to know the Git package name. But there's something like if you wanted to install Telegram, for instance, the Telegram is Telegram desktop bin, which is the package. So if you're using the CLI, but the GUI has all that information there. You just search for Telegram. It sorts it by priority. So basically the not priority but popularity, and the top popularity one is usually the one that you want. Now I understand how they could go wrong. If you're really new to Linux, you just install something you have no idea what it is. So unlike Ubuntu with the GNOME Software Center, which they use now, there's no it doesn't give you a screenshot or a very good description of what you're installing. It doesn't give you the ability to review or anything like that. It's nothing that complicated. It's just it has a couple of links. You can go to view the GitHub page or on the art community. So it's a little bit different. I really like it. So what was your guys' experience with the package manager on Manjaro?
Okay, I can. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I won't be long into this. For me, the thing with the package managers for me is that it's really hard because the fact that I work in Windows and Mac every day means I'm in the GUI interface. And then you see the thing when I'm in the CLI, but even with Ubuntu, everything is getting so there's so many GUI alternate versions or whatever, and even in Manjaro, I find myself just using that because I use GUI all day, and I don't like it. I like, because with the CLI, then I have to learn the commands. But like Matt said, the thing I don't like, and I had it happen before, was like if I search on a forum or something and I see a name of software and I do apt-get search, get installed, and it'll say that there's this name, or you know what I mean? Like, I wish they had some way that they had like a main thing you could go to and search through. You know, I mean, which they kind of do in the GUI interface, because you can search and it'll come up. But like I said, I would prefer to use the command line instead. That's just because how I am. I like that. Like Matt likes to try new things every day. Really, the command line, because I'm sort of newish to it, so it intrigues me. But I do find using the GUI is a lot easier, and of course, as a person, easier thing. My experience.
Yeah, Rick, we only got about 1 every 3 words out of that, but okay.
Am I breaking up?
Something about Pac-Man packages and being
happy. We think we got that you use the GUI reluctantly because you'd rather use the CLI.
Yeah.
Yeah. For some reason, your somebody's internet was going crazy. All right, so Faith, what about you?
Really?
What do you think about the Pac-Man?
Okay, so I have tried to have a broader view on the topic, right? Because Ricky was saying, okay, the thing about Linux is they don't have something unified or some sort of a wizard where you can switch. And the thing about Linux, if you think about it, is that there's more separation in Linux than in Windows, right? I mean, or in Mac or whatever, because people in Linux is just made of different modules and components that are very stripped apart, and they have their own philosophies. And what distros do is put that together. And when putting that together, there's lots of decision making into where to put things, how to control things, what to let the user or not to let the user do. And that's where the package manager also come in an important role. So the philosophy is very important. If you think about the Fedora is very free-oriented distro. They don't want commercial stuff in there. They don't want to have external, they allow external repositories, but it's like your problem. We are not going to help you there. Where in Arch Linux you have the official repos where you access with Pac-Man, and you want to do our. Our is completely supported by the community, so that has a big trade-off, right? Because maybe some package, the maintainer did not have time to keep it maintained, and if no one jumped in, maybe the package is marked as outdated, and things might happen there because it's all on the users. Where the trade-off and things like external repos like Debian, where you add your own certificate to external repo to download the package, is that you're basically telling the owner of the package, whoever created it, like Chrome or SBT or Scala or whatever program you're trying to install, it's a problem of the maintainer. So in our, instead, you have the maintainer's problem, where the owners of the package are the actual owners of them, and then you have the user, who is the one that actually puts up that hour, the package in the hour, and it has a longer process, if you get what I mean. So there is a risk involved in that. One needs to know and be conscious that there's longer process between the creator of the package and the user community putting in an hour, and then yourself in your own setup of your PC and trying to get it done. What happens if you screw up with something? So there's a little bit of trade-off, and the good thing about Manjaro also is that it improves that because it gives you a GUI pre-installed, and also they help a lot with hardware detection with their MHWD program, where they detect your hardware and help you install the drivers. So they help you a lot in there, and the community is great. I have also posted a package request in the forums of Manjaro once to ask for a package that wasn't in the hour, because the original package was only in deb and RPM, and they helped there put it together, make sure it worked for me. But it's all on the user. So that's the note I make, and that means it depends on how you use your PC. So if you rely a lot on commercial packages or on proprietary drivers, you will have a longer process here than in Debian, where Debian Ubuntu, where the package creators make the standard way, thinking that the user is going to use Debian or Ubuntu. So there's a risk involved, but nonetheless, I think that Manjaro is doing a great thing there, helping the user more with accessing the Hour and Pacman. So that's a little bit on my view.
Yeah, I agree. One thing that Pacman or Manjaro does way better than like just standard Arch or Antergos, which is what I was using, is driver management. Because you mentioned drivers, like in Manjaro, there's actual like Manjaro software, something or the other, where it actually you can go through and it will search for drivers for your graphics card or your Wi-Fi card or whatever. Whereas that's not the case in Antergos, because Antergos just will only download the drivers through the repositories, and then it's up to you to go through and install them and configure them on your own. And it's not as easy as doing it through the GUI on Manjaro. So, real quick, guys,
we're running problems on Antergos with NVIDIA video card. I have a 1060 GTX, and booting an Antergos on my PC, like physical PC, not a virtual box. The problems appeared, right? Like the boot manager did not how to handle my video card, so the standard installation did not work. They include an NVIDIA fallback launcher on the boot manager. That helped a little bit, but the fonts were huge, the resolution was not set properly, and that's a sign, right? Like how a distribution manages proprietary drivers and installation.
Yeah.
So
one thing
even on my laptop.
Go ahead, Ricky.
That's not a pleasant odor.
He is going. You just can't hear him.
Like just talking with you guys, I'm thinking right now that this weekend take off. What? I think what's going on with.
You must have something running in the background, Ricky, because your internet's not working very well. Either that or fine. You can hear me perfectly, right?
Yes, I can. I'm also losing Ricky.
Yeah, Ricky.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Canada. It's like the ass end of Canada. I mean, there's no way to have internet up in there. I mean, it's all snowy and they got their snowshoes.
Yeah, signal is not good. There's lots of cold wind. The wind distorts the sign.
Man, you look at this snow. It's like, have you ever even seen snow?
No, not that one.
Kids got volleyball and football and like real world football, not the crappy shit the Americans have. So, anyways, Ricky's gonna try to sign off and join us, but we should continue on. Let's talk about Budgie real quick, and then we'll have to get going. I really enjoyed the desktop environment of Budgie. For me, we can hear you, Ricky. Are you a little bit better?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now. We'll see if it sticks around. So we're gonna talk about Budgie for 5 minutes, then we'll try to wrap it up. Ricky?
Yeah. No, I was just, since you talking with you guys, I'm thinking with my laptop this weekend, I think I'm going to grab all the data off, make a list of my programs, and then I'm going to reload it with the newest, I don't know, either Ubuntu or Manjaro, because I still have driver issues from when I installed it last year, right? So that goes along with the drivers that you guys were talking about, right? Like, I can't use my touchpad. I have to use a mouse.
Oh, really?
The touch screen will accept input, but only sometime.
Yeah, see, I haven't